Good afternoon to all of St. Lucia. Good afternoon to all of our Caribbean partners, television partners, media partners on all platforms. We are here in Groseley and, of course, the palatial grounds there of the Royalton Hotel. I am Lisa Joseph. Of the Government Information Service, and I'm joined by Primus Hutchinson of the Government Information Service, and we are indeed proud to bring to you the opening ceremony, the regular meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM. It is the 40th such meeting taking place here, and it is indeed very special for us here in St. Lucia because our Prime Minister, the Honorable Alan Chastney, is going to take up chairmanship of CARICOM for the next 6 months, and that stint ends on the 31st of December. In his capacity as chair, Honorable Alan Chastney will chair both the plenary and caucus sessions that's going to happen this week, that is on Thursday and Friday, where the heads of government and other representatives will be meeting to discuss all of the issues confronting the CARICOM region, as well as find solutions to some of the pesky problems that we are having. Primus, for us, it is indeed an auspicious occasion. The Prime Minister also, within the quasi-cabinet of CARICOM, has lead responsibility for sustainable development. He's had that portfolio for some time. So sustainable development, and that includes the environment, disaster management, and water. It is exceedingly important because right now in the region, we are concentrating on climate change, what those effects are, how we are combating it, what we need to do in order to protect ourselves as best as we can, because we can never completely fight off climate change. However, we can do to mitigate the effects. Primus, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Lisa. Again, it's very quite a momentous occasion, Lisa. As always, every time there is a heads of government conference here, that is the pomp and ceremony and the hype and all. We mentioned our media partners, but of course our viewers in the region as well as the diaspora. We need to welcome them as well. Perhaps what we can now do is to give you a rundown of the program for this afternoon. First, to begin with, we have the arrival of the Secretary General of CARICOM, that is the Ambassador Owen Larocque, and following this is the heads of state of the various governments. Then the Prime Minister of Norway, who's visiting, will be with us as well, and the United Nations Secretary General. The procession of head of states and government. First of all, we'll have the arrival of the Governor General, and then followed by the singing of the national anthem. This will be followed by the singing of the CARICOM song celebrating CARICOM. I'm not too sure if you're familiar with the CARICOM song.
And the song done originally there by Michael Henderson of Dominica.
Yes. Right, great. And then we have opening prayers. Then following opening prayers, there will be remarks by His Excellency Ambassador Owen Larocque, Secretary General of CARICOM. Then followed by remarks by the Honorable Timothy Harris, outgoing chairman of CARICOM. Lisa, you want to give us a few ideas?
But certainly, with activities like these, or events rather like these, we always have cultural performances, and we're looking forward to seeing St. Mary's College Choir, Seth Isidore of the Eucharist Lewis Estate Primary School will be here, and the St. Lucia School of Music. Very well done when it comes to jazz, and I know that this audience will be thrilled with the St. Lucia School of Music just coming off their stint at the St. Lucia Jazz. They had, and then for the first time, they headlined an act. So they featured at their own concert for the first time this year at St. Lucia Jazz. We're also looking forward to hearing remarks by the UN Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, And he should have some very poignant words, though, because we have the September meetings coming up in New York at the United Nations headquarters. And there again, the issue of climate change is going to take a front center stage. We'll also be having a cultural activity by the Avid Dance Ministry, and for our Caribbean viewers, they'll be in for a treat where that is concerned. And also Honorable Alan Chasney, as chairman of CARICOM, assuming the chairmanship, will be delivering his remarks. And then we'll be having the departure of the Governor General, which will be an end to the official ceremony before the opening of the 40th meeting of the heads of convents.
Of course, Lisa, we expecting to have with us shortly the Assistant Secretary General for Trade and Economic Integration, Mr. Joseph Cox, who would perhaps give a rundown of some of the activities there, some of what we need.
Before we do that, Primus, we want to go on the outside because we are facilitating all angles of this auspicious event. We have Alicia Ali who's standing by, and she is on about at the arrival carpet, or the red carpet if you will. Alicia?
And hi, we're live outside the Royalton Resort, and with me I have Earl Huntley, the great, we should say. This is a GIS broadcast of the opening ceremony of the 40th CARICOM Heads of Government meeting with me, Alicia Ali. As I said, Earl Huntley here. Mr. Huntley, you've worked with CARICOM for quite some time. Can you tell me, what does it mean to you for St. Lucia to be having this CARICOM Heads of Government at this time with such prestigious guests?
Well, it is not the first CARICOM meeting here, but it's at a very critical time. There are always important things happening in the world. For CARICOM itself, one of the main things at this meeting is the continuation of the application of the CSME, particularly freedom of movement of travel. They have expanded the categories of people to include builders, etc. But I think they need to expand it more, and I would hope that it will be totally free.
There are some gaps with the implementation, which it is intended to be addressed at this session. Right. And we do have a very special guest in the person of the United Nations Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Gutierrez. How do you feel about him being here, especially in light of the small island developing states and climate change and all the climate action talks we've been having?
It's just being elected to the Security Council, which means that he's going to bring to us what are the important issues that these small islands have to deal with. As you mentioned, climate change is probably one of the most critical ones for us. So I'm hoping that out of this meeting, we shall be able to go forward with some of the issues that are to be discussed.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Huntley. And as we said, there are quite a number of regional, international, and local delegations right here at the Royalton in St. Lucia. We saw the OAS Deputy Secretary General, His Excellency Nestor Mendez, who is here representing the Organization of American States. As I mentioned before during my interview with Mr. Huntley, we have the UN Secretary General, who is here, as well as the Prime Minister of Norway, and a number of very important people who have been passing through our red carpet. So we'll head back to you, Lisa and Primus.
And we're taking a scene there from outside with Alicia Ali for those arriving there. And Primus, always something good to see all of our Caribbean neighbors, our brothers and sisters. Here at the 40th regular meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government, there are many dimensions to this conference, and the Secretary General, Honorable Irvin LaRocque, met with members of the media to flesh out some of the concerns, issues, successes as well of the Caribbean community. That discussion was held at the Government Information Service. We want to take a listen at how the Secretary General laid out what we ought to expect at this meeting.
The 40th meeting of the Heads of Government will be held here in St. Lucia under the chairmanship of the Prime Minister, Honorable Alan Chasney, who assumed the chair on the 1st of July. We expect a full house of member states. All member states will be represented. We'll have 11 heads of government joining us as far as the member states, and we have 4 heads from the associate members. So we have a fairly full house, and the other member states are represented at the ministerial level. We expect to have 2 special guests with us. Honorable Erna Solberg, the Prime Minister of Norway, will be a special guest and will interact with heads. And His Excellency Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, will also be here with us for an interaction with the heads. The opening ceremony, as you may know by now, will take place on Wednesday afternoon at 4:30 at the Royalton Hotel. There'll be 4 speakers: the chairman, Prime Minister Chasney; the immediate past chairman, Prime Minister Timothy Harris of St. Kitts and Nevis, and as well as the Secretary General of the United Nations. He'll also address the opening ceremony, and of course yours truly will give some opening remarks. The agenda basically will be looking at some of the items that we have been looking for in terms of what progress are being made. The CARICOM single market and economy will feature prominently once again. You know that we had set some timelines and a work plan that had been agreed to by heads of government, and basically we'll be getting an update on who has done what and who has not done what, and see how we move forward. There has been some progress, but not as much as I think we all might anticipate, and for some of it for good reason. The private sector, labor and civil society will join us. Representatives of the private sector, labor and civil society will join us for the discussions on the CSME. They are representative of the persons who will be using, the population at large will be using, who have to make use of the CSME. So we'll be hearing from them in terms of how best we could make it more usable and user-friendly. There's also going to be a discussion, proposals by recognizing the private sector, regional private sector body that will be representative and be an interlocutor between the various organs of the community and the private sector. We've also, I think at the last meeting, we already recognized the CCL as an associate institution, and I guess at some point we'll have to be doing the same for civil society. That is just showing that we're seeking to be more interactive, more consultative with the population at large, the stakeholders. I should just mention, last night I had a very interesting interaction with the youth of the region through the CARICOM Youth Ambassador Corps, and they too are asking for some sort of entree so that there can be some dialogue and not just tokenism, as they put it, with regards to representation. So the CSME will be one of the major items, and that linked to that is the Commission on the Economy. We had reappointed the Commission on the Economy, and the Commission was given one year to do its work, and they started the work earlier this year, and they're to give an interim report. The Commission is chaired by Dr. Avinash Prasad of Barbados, and is made up of a number of prominent individuals, not only regional persons, but 1 or 2 from out of the region, and they will be given an update on that. And that, of course, is linked to the CSME, and is linked, of course, to the issue of growth and sustainable growth in our region.
The Secretary General there of CARICOM speaking to members of the media ahead of this auspicious occasion here. And we're very fortunate to have with us Mr. Joseph Cox, who's the Assistant Secretary General for Trade and Economic Integration with the CARICOM Secretariat. Thank you so much. I know it's a busy time. It must have been very hectic planning for this meeting, making sure everything is executed as it should. So we want to get right into the middle of things. Your office really has a sort of central role in the functioning, I think, of what CARICOM's mandate is at this time. Because when we look at being able to mobilize small businesses, we're mobilizing trade, we are, interested in ICT and these things. Your office is really the driving force of all of that, along with, I suppose, supporting agencies. I know you've been modest. We had that conversation off air, but I know you've been modest. But for us, for the CARICOM single market and economy, it is something with all of its tentacles. We are still hearing some concerns about whether it is as effective as it should be. Give us an understanding from the inside how much progress we've made.
Oh, that's actually easy. We have made considerable progress, but one of the things that people need to recognize and always keep at the back of their minds is that the achievement of a single market and economy is not a destination, it's a process. And it involves a lot of moving parts. So for example, you have gains, because remember that we're not working in a static environment. The global dynamic changes and so on, so you have to adapt. So some of the policies that, for example, would have been seeking to effect a decade ago, and people say, oh, why they haven't done it yet? Part of the challenge that we're having is that we have had to change the policies to be more relevant to today. And to be honest with you, over the past, I would say, year and a half, we have been pushing out probably a 70-80% implementation rate. So I mean, whereas I understand, I truly understand the impatience. One of the things that we have to recognize that we have made substantial progress. For example, look at the thing like contingent rights. I think has been around forever from what I was told, long before I came there. It's done. A lot of the policies we put in place, renewable energy building code, done. We put in place a multilateral air services agreement, done. That's the point. There are a lot of things that are doing, and a lot of them, what they do is that it really comes back to being, what exactly do you perceive the role of government to be and versus what the private sector is. Private sector is your engine of growth. The government, and by extension an institution like CARICOM, what it does is that it develops a policy framework. What is the enabling environment to facilitate this growth and development within the country? That's what it really is about. So it's a partnership, as well as it is a process whereby you are seeking to effect change while conforming to what obtains in the wider world.
Just hold on, Prime Minister, just for a moment. And so we just want to take our viewers outside at the arrival carpet, where Alicia is standing by.
And we have quite a high-level delegation.
Like that right now.
Prime Minister of Jamaica, Andrew Holness, making his way into the official area. He's one of many dignitaries who has been making their way on the red carpet. We actually saw Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Honorable Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, and as you know, St. Vincent was recently elected to the UN Security Council, first for the Caribbean, first for small island states in the Caribbean, and especially in the Eastern Caribbean. We have representatives from all over the world, from the European Union. We do have representatives from the United Nations and the Organization of American States. This is a high-level meeting where matters on national security, security within our region, integration in our region, climate action, climate change, education, as well as a number of other issues relating to health and governance will be discussed over the course of this 40th CARICOM Heads of Government meeting right here in beautiful St. Lucia. And we do expect quite a bit to come out in terms of the policies and policy advice to all our CARICOM member states. We do have represented every CARICOM member state, including our associated and full member states. As you can see, there are more people making their way in, and we're supposed to be starting the opening ceremony, as Alyssa and Primus have been telling you, in just a bit. So we're going to go back to them and see what's going on the inside.
Okay. Welcome back. We have the Assistant Secretary General Trade and Economic Integration. How well are the member states embracing the policies governing the CSME? Are you satisfied that member states are doing this?
Oh, Lord. That's a loaded question. And the answer, to give you a true economist answer, yes and no. Because yes, we are happy with the embrace, and I mean I will have to pay tribute to the lead head on the CSME, Mia Mottley, Prime Minister of Barbados, because she has really added additional energy, additional impetus to the implementation process. Do we sometimes wish that the process could go faster? Of course we do. But the thing is that you get a sense of renewed commitment by the member states to treating with the issue of the single market and economy, and that's where we take our comfort from. That's what gives us the additional energy and the drive to really to implement and foster this process.
But the conference here, some of the major issues that are going to be.
All right. What basically, for example, for the single market and economy, we're looking at updating on where we are in terms of the implementation. Basically, a checklist of what it is. Coming out of it, you'll also have a discussion on things like blacklisting, which you know is of great significance to us. There are also other issues that deal with security matters and so on. In other words, the complementary processes to developing the single market and economy. Because remember, the process does not operate in a vacuum. So you have a human and social development dynamic. You also have to treat with how do we interact, how do we leverage our power, basically as small states in a global environment.
Mr. Cox, thank you so much for spending time with
Yes, sure.
your busy schedule to be with us. We appreciate this a great deal. And we hope that your stay here will be fruitful and make the best of it.
Indeed.
And enjoy the hospitality of our people.
I do, Captain. Thank you very much.
Okay, we've been speaking with the Assistant Secretary General for Trade and Integration, Mr. Joseph Cox. Lisa,
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Cox, for that, and we're looking forward to seeing you throughout the meeting. One of the things I mentioned earlier that Prime Minister, the Honourable Alan Chasney, is a member of the quasi cabinet for CARICOM. When we come back from the arrivals carpet, we will be hearing from other members of that quasi cabinet. But first, over to Alicia Ali.
And with me, I have Richard Payne from the St. Lucia School of Music. The St. Lucia School of Music is part of the cultural presentation where we are going to be introducing the region and the world to the unique St. Lucian culture and what we have to offer. So, Mr. Payne, can you tell me, what can we expect later?
A very diverse performance, elements of our folk culture and heritage, elements of our pan culture, our folk drumming, classical, and Latin American music as well too. Diverse celebration of what we do at the St. Lucia School of Music.
And so you were trying as best as possible to really bring that CARICOM flavor in it. Because as much as we are similar islands and we have a shared history as well as similar policies, we do have our differences, and our differences are what makes us unique, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, and I think the music needs to reflect that a little bit, and this is why, again, this is going to be so diverse. We will start first with a piece called Vivaldi's Spring, a classical piece, followed by a tribute to Florita, which is a folk suite composed by none other than Mr. Gregory Piper, who's one of our celebrated arrangers, and this is a tribute to Florita Marquis, one of our folk songstresses, if you will. And that will be followed by some the library steel pan. Many people don't realize, but some of the key performers in the library steel pan are members of the St. Lucia School of Music as well too. So they will be performing. Caribbean Grains will be performing.
And you know, steel pan is our thing here in the Caribbean.
Exactly. So we have to, we have to put that stamp, right? This is something that we celebrate in the region as well too, our young folk drummers as well too. And we also have a very diverse faculty who come from South America, the US and the Caribbean as well. And we'll be performing faculty and students and friends in a more relaxed sort of setting after the opening ceremony outside here as well.
Well, Mr. Payne, we're definitely looking forward to that, and I'm sure our anchors in studio are looking forward to it too. So, Lisa Primus, back to you.
The plenary sessions begin this week and beginning Thursday morning, where the heads will be discussing quite a number of issues. And as we heard from Joseph Cox a while ago, the CSME is going to feature prominently. And the main issue there would be for them to address the gaps in implementation of agreements and to agree on measures to ensure the people of the region get benefits of the CSME in an effective and timely manner. Exactly what Mr. Joseph Cox, what we were discussing here. Economic growth. The heads are expected to get an interim report from the 10-member commission on the economy, which they appointed in December of last year. which was responsible for examining potential growth areas for the member states. Blacklisting. The meeting will be looking at the ongoing targeting of member states, and that is what CARICOM has labeled it, a target by the European Union on the ongoing advocacy by CARICOM and how CARICOM can use its diplomatic force as well as its political force to see how we can ameliorate this situation of the blacklisting. Private sector engagement. We know that for any economy to be able to be successful, the private sector, small business especially, must be churning. And so the heads will be having a discussion on the regional private sector and the labor movement and how that is affecting the growth agenda. Foreign relations is also a topic up for discussion. Several matters. Most pressing will be the situation with Venezuela and how the community is approaching it. It's a humanitarian crisis. There are thousands, and we're hearing reports of millions of Venezuelans who have already fled their homeland, looking for a safe haven. We know that our Caribbean neighbors, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, Suriname, which border in Venezuela, are experiencing the brunt of that exodus from Venezuela, and that discussion is going to be a very delicate one for CARICOM. Security, regional security, a very major talking point for the heads. Primus?
Yes, Lisa, perhaps what we can now do is to give you an idea of the various member states when they join and the head of state of that particular Caribbean community, CARICOM community. We'll start with Antigua and Barbuda. This Caribbean country joined CARICOM on the 4th of July 1974 and is now been led by Prime Minister Gaston Brown. The Bahamas joined on the 4th of July 1983 and is been led by Prime Minister Hubert Minnis. Barbados in the 1st of August 1973, now under the Prime Ministership of Mayor Motley. Belize joined on the 1st of May 1974, and the Prime Minister is Dean Barrow. Dominica on the 1st of May 1974, and it's been led by Prime Minister Roosevelt Scarrett. Grenada joined on the 1st of May 1974, and Grenada has been led by Dr. Keith Mitchell. Guyana joined on the 1st of August 1973, now been led by Moses Magamoto. Haiti joined the CARICOM community on July 2nd, 2002, a provisional membership on 4th July 1998 it was, and Haiti has been led by Jean-Michel Lapin. Jamaica joined on the 1st of August 1973, one of the 4 founding members, and is under the Prime Ministership of Andrew Holness. We don't have any information on Montserrat, Lisa.
The membership for Montserrat in 1974.
Okay.
So that's just around the time that they started, and the premier is Donald Romeo.
Okay. And St. Kitts.
St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Timothy Harris is Mr. Prime Minister. Membership was gained in 1974 as well. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, led by Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, and membership again is 1974. Suriname, the Prime Minister there is Desi Baltazar. Membership for Suriname in 1995. Trinidad and Tobago, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, and membership for Trinidad came in 1973. And they are the associate members. We'll run through them quickly. They are Anguilla with membership from 1999. Bermuda, membership in 2003. The British Virgin Islands, the membership then in 1991. The Cayman Islands membership came in 2002. Turks and Caicos Islands, the membership came in 1991. Now, promise, as we indicated earlier, the quasi-cabinet for CARICOM, lots of work happening there. And this is running alongside what the leaders already, the responsibilities in their respective countries. We know that St. Lucia's Prime Minister has responsibility for sustainable development, that includes the environment and water. But we also have, very importantly, for tourism, and we know that it's the lifeblood economy for the region, multi-billion-dollar industry. The Prime Minister for the Bahamas, Hubert Minnis, has responsibility for tourism within that quasi-cabinet. Let's take a listen to him as to tell us what his responsibilities are.
As a member of the CARICOM quasi-cabinet with responsibility for tourism, one of my goals is to see the development of the tourism brand across the region. The Caribbean is an archipelago of discovery and wonder, bound together by geography, history, and culture. We must broaden our brand in tourism. Our region must be known for extraordinary visitor experiences and services. We must also be known as a global center of excellence for all aspects of tourism development. Governments play an essential role in helping entrepreneurs to gain access to the skills and resources needed for success. If we can give birth to a generation of new entrepreneurs, we can move the Caribbean tourism to greater heights and in many new directions. One of these new directions is a greater global involvement in tourism by the people of the Caribbean. When we look at tourism in its totality, there are more employment and engagement opportunities in tourism than in almost any other economic sector. In the Bahamas, we are trained and educating a new generation of entrepreneurs to help our citizens garner greater economic benefits from tourism. My government has launched the Small Business Development Center with the guiding principle that sustainable economic growth should be driven by Bahamian investment and creativity in tandem with strategic international investment. In delivering domestic, regional, and international services, we must ensure greater ownership of our travel and tourism sector for Caribbean nationals. For far too long, we have focused our attention in tourism development on local personal services, which, though currently critically important, is not the totality of the talent required for the development of this economic sector into an economic powerhouse. We can take the Caribbean spirit, ethos, and imagination global. The world needs the Caribbean, not only as a place to visit. The world should relish and delight in what the Caribbean may bring to the global commons. We must ensure that we deliver the very best range of exceptional personal services to our own visitors. We must also become far more focused on providing global tourism services. Travel and tourism continue to evolve at a pace that requires us to constantly innovate in order to maintain market share and to meet the expectations of our visitors. We must keep pace with such innovation, but we must also be the drivers of global innovation.
Prime Minister of the Bahamas there, Hubert Minnis, telling us about his role as a lead for tourism within the quasi-cabinet there for CARICOM. And CARICOM diverse, 15 member states. We're looking at 5 associate member states. We also have observer states as well. And that brings quite a diversity to not just the names of the countries, but the cultures, the people, language, primers. So give us an idea as to what it is that the diversity.
CARICOM was established by the English-speaking parts of the Caribbean and currently include all the independent Anglophone island countries, like plus Belize, Guyana, Montserrat, as well as other British Caribbean territories. And Bermuda as an associate member. English was its sole working language in the 1990s. However, the organization has become multilingual with the addition of Dutch-speaking Suriname in 1995 and Haitian and French-speaking islands in 2002, Haiti in particular. And furthermore, it has been suggested that Spanish should also become a working language. Therefore, we as a multilingual country, Creole is of great importance. And of course, in the diaspora, we have those who perhaps would want to hear a few, something said in Creole as well. And so we think it's, perhaps we, that's why we have you here, to at least, say a few, as far as the proceedings here today, in Creole, for our Creole listeners who are out there in the diaspora. And so, Mr. Madam, some of ladies say, Mon Kikakutea Dominic, Haiti, Elizabeth Je, Setlisiki, Elizabeth P. Kawaibla, Yon Wakof Masala, c'est yon qui a fait tout ces pays CARICOM, et pour ça la 40e là qu'a fait à cette ici, à la Hotel Royal Jordi là, et about chairmanship Prime Minister Alan Chasney qui Prime Minister ici, la réunion pile bagay yo kay discuter ici là à ce moment pour CARICOM pour primaire, et c'est ça qui a fait. Nous avons plus à ça qu'on va continuer ceremony. So this I guess,
But now what we're having, Prime Minister, at this stage, you've been now being the proceedings being called to order. We'll be having the procession of the heads of government right now, so we want to go to the stage.
Commonwealth of the Bahamas, represented by Dr. the Most Honorable Hubert Alexander Minnis, Prime Minister, escorted by Krishna St. Bryce, who shared the award for Most Outstanding Youth in Entrepreneurship 2018. Barbados, represented by Honorable Mia Amor Motley, Prime Minister, escorted by Sam Udovic, Most Outstanding Student Leader 2018. Belize, represented by Honorable Wilfred Peter Alrington, Minister for Foreign Affairs, escorted by Anita Felix, Most Outstanding Youth of the Year 2018. Commonwealth of Dominica, represented by Honorable Francine Barron, Minister for Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, escorted by Aldrich Edward, Youth Service Week awardee from Babonneau Youth Synergy Project. Grenada, represented by Right Honorable Dr. Keith Mitchell, Prime Minister, escorted by McAllister Hunt, CARICOM Youth Ambassador of St. Lucia. Cooperative Republic of Guyana, represented by Honorable Dr. Karen Cummings, Minister for Foreign Affairs, escorted by Elizabeth Herman, student of the Ballata Government Primary School. Republic of Haiti, represented by His Excellency Jovenel Moïse, President, escorted by Valdine Belrose, student of the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College, Business Administration Division. Jamaica, represented by the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister, escorted by Arnold Marshall, student of the Dame Paulette Louise Primary School. Montserrat, represented by Honorable Claude Hogan, Minister for Agriculture, Trade, Lands, Housing, and the Environment, escorted by Akira Morgan, student of the Eucharist Lewis Seventh-day Adventist Primary School. St. Kitts and Nevis, represented by Dr. the Honorable Timothy Harris, Prime Minister, escorted by Lakiba Alexander, student of the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College Business Administration Division. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, represented by Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonzalez, Prime Minister, escorted by Rafaela Logan, student of the Groselet Primary School. Republic of Suriname, represented by His Excellency Michael Ashwin Adhin, Vice President, escorted by Keone Wilson, student of the Eucharist Lewis Seventh-day Adventist Primary School. Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, represented by Dr. the Honorable Keith Rowley, Prime Minister, escorted by Jewel Daniel, student of the Camille Henry Memorial School. Bermuda, represented by Honorable David Burt, Premier, escorted by Cornelius Kenzie, student of the Groselet Primary School. British Virgin Islands, represented by the Honorable Andrew Alturo Foy, Premier, escorted by Jaden Leon, student of the St. Mary's College Secondary School. Turks and Caicos Islands, represented by Honorable Charlene Cartwright Robinson, Premier, escorted by Indira Court, student of the We Wisdom Montessori School. St. Lucia, represented by Honorable Alan Chasney, Prime Minister, escorted by Marie-Therese St. Clair, top performer in the 2019 Common Entrance Examination. Ms. St. Clair is a student of the Dame Paulette Louise Primary School. Cayman Islands, represented by Honorable Alden McLaughlin, Premier, escorted by Destiny Daniel, student of the Dame Paulette Louise Primary School. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the arrival of Their Excellencies Sir Emmanuel Neville Snack, Governor General, and Lady Snack, and remain standing for the National Anthem of St. Lucia, led by Ms. Rochelle James. remain standing for the invocation, which will be delivered by Devin Ford.
Thank you. Shall we pray? Dear Heavenly and Eternal Father, Creator of all, the one who sees, knows everything. Father, we thank you for this day because this is the day that you have made. And everything that is done should be according to your purpose. Father, I thank you that at this time we are gathered here together with the heads of government of the Caribbean community. Father, we pray today that you bless them. We thank you that they have arrived here safely. Father, we thank you for every representative of government, every delegate. And God, we thank you that we have this opportunity where we could come together to celebrate. But Father, as we celebrate, may they not only celebrate, but also collaborate, Father. We thank you for the understanding and the idea of unity. And so, Father, may unity be strong amongst us. We ask that you bless today's proceedings, bless the discussions, bless the ideas for today and in the future. We thank you once again for all that you have done, for what you are doing and what you are about to do. In Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Please be seated as the St. Mary's College Choir renders the CARICOM song, which can be found to the back of your program.
Our forefathers came, some seeking adventure, some bound in chains. Through battles waged and fought, through victory and pain, by test of their courage, our freedom was gained. Homage to those gone before us, the heroes of lands in the sun. We vow to join hands and to focus on building one Caribbean. Raise your voices high, sing of your Caribbean pride. Sing for you stand CARICOM. Knock you John CARICOM. Oh, for you stand CARICOM. Raise your voices high, sing up your Caribbean pride, sing it loud and strong, feel our hearts beat as one. Celebrating song as we rise to heights where we belong. Sound the victory drum for CARICOM. Oh, for you stand CARICOM. Knock you John CARICOM. Oh, for you stand CARICOM.
Your Excellencies, Sir Emmanuel Neville Snack, Governor General, and Lady Snack, Honorable Alan Chasney, Prime Minister of St. Lucia, and Mrs. Chasney, Prime Ministers of CARICOM member states, Honorable Erna Solberg, Prime Minister of Norway, Your Excellency Antonio Gutierrez, Secretary General of the United Nations, Ms. Janine Girodi McIntyre, President of the Senate, Mr. Andy Daniel, Speaker of the House of Assembly, members of the Cabinet of St. Lucia, Ministers of Government of CARICOM member states, Honorable Philip J. Pierre, Leader of the Opposition, former Prime Ministers of St. Lucia, Your Excellency Erwin LaRocque, Secretary General of CARICOM, Mauricia Thomas, Deputy President of the Senate, other members of the Senate and House of Assembly, members of the Diplomatic Corps, permanent secretaries, delegates to the 40th Conference of Heads of Government of CARICOM, staff of the CARICOM Secretariat, specially invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the opening ceremony of the 40th regular meeting of the Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community. During this evening's activity, there will be 4 speeches, the first of which will be delivered by His Excellency Ambassador Erwin LaRocque, Secretary General of CARICOM. I now invite Secretary General LaRocque to the podium.
His Excellency Sir Emmanuel Neville Snack, Governor General of St. Lucia and Lady Snack, Honorable Alan Chasney, Prime Minister of St. Lucia and Chairman of the Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community, Dr. the Honorable Timothy Harris, Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis and our immediate past Chairman, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government of the Caribbean Community, our special guests, Honorable Erna Solberg, Prime Minister of Norway, and His Excellency Antonio Gutierrez, Secretary General of the United Nations, members of Parliament of St. Lucia, honorable ministers, Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, representative of the United States Virgin Islands to the U.S. House of Representatives, His Excellency Luis Almagro, Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Her Excellency June Suma, Secretary General of the Association of Caribbean States, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished delegates, distinguished guests, people of the Caribbean community, and may I also recognize the CARICOM youth ambassadors who are with us, representatives of the media, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all to the opening ceremony of the 40th meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community. I am sure I speak on behalf of all delegations when I express appreciation for the generous hospitality offered by the government and people of St. Lucia. Prime Minister Chasney, I thank you and your hardworking staff for the excellent arrangements put in place for the efficient conduct of this meeting, which will help to ensure an effective outcome. I also welcome you, Prime Minister Chasney, to the chairmanship of the Caribbean Community. For the next 6 months, you will be the standard bearer for CARICOM as you lead the community's efforts to advance the integration movement and improve the welfare of its people. with the support of your colleague heads of government, the Secretariat, and regional institutions. It is a task that was ably carried out by Dr. the Honorable Timothy Harris, Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, over the past 6 months. Prime Minister Harris guided CARICOM through a challenging period and ensured that the momentum of our reinvigorated international and regional agendas was maintained. Thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister Harris. I take the opportunity to extend a special welcome to our special guests, the Prime Minister of Norway, the Honorable Erna Solberg. And the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres. Prime Minister Solberg, in coming to our region, you have underlined your commitment to strengthen relations with our community. You are a prominent advocate on issues related to climate change, the environment, and sustainable ocean economy, matters which are of critical importance to our member states. Thank you. Secretary General Guterres, you have shown an abiding interest in the welfare of our region. I recall your visit to our affected countries following the passage of Hurricanes Irma and Maria in 2017, and your ready acceptance of my invitation to personally participate in the CARICOM UN High-Level Pledging Conference, which was hosted by the UN. Further, the UNDP has been working with the CARICOM Secretariat and the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency to craft a proposal to build capacity in our region to realize our goal of climate and disaster resilience. I thank you, Secretary General, for your continued commitment and support to our region. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, heads of government, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the resilience that we seek to build extends to our economies. It must be built upon the foundation provided by the CARICOM single market and economy. We have been engaged in a challenging task to create one market out of 12 developing economies, each of which is at different levels of development. We have persevered and we have made progress. However, we are lagging behind the deadlines agreed to in the implementation plan. It is in our interest to accelerate this process and to create a competitive regional economy. We have brought on board the private sector, labor, civil society, representatives of whom will engage with heads of government at this meeting. The youth of our community continue to express their interests in the advancement of the CSME, as they told me on Monday during a live forum which reached more than 15,000 youth via the internet. These stakeholders are the beneficiaries of the CSME and therefore have a major stake in its implementation. One of the complementary initiatives agreed to last December at a special meeting on the CSME was the restructuring of the Commission on the Economy. Its mandate includes the formulation of broad guidelines to inform domestic economic policy making to enhance growth within the respective economies and measures to strengthen the functioning of the CSME. At this meeting, the Commission will present a preliminary report. Progress in advancing the CSME must be on the bedrock of a safe and secure economy. Concerns about crime and security have a common thread throughout the member states. We have been making every effort at the regional level to enhance our cooperation and to put in place a security architecture to combat the scourge. An important feature of that architecture are the legal instruments which have been agreed, but which are still awaiting more signatures to come into force. Following on the Special Summit on Security this May, this meeting will receive proposals aimed at deepening security cooperation in addressing transnational and domestic crime. We must be prepared legally and operationally to defy those who are intent on disrupting our society and destroying our way of life. The threats to our society are not only posed by crime and security. The blacklisting of some of our member states and associate members as non-cooperative tax jurisdictions is a clear and direct threat to the economic well-being of those countries. Our member states have a sovereign right to determine their fiscal policy. Our compliance with the regulatory measures and standards for tax transparency set by the OECD, the recognized global authority, is being disregarded by others. The arbitrary impositions of rules by countries and groups of countries other than the OECD with respect to tax governance and anti-money laundering without meaningful consultation with the affected states is unacceptable. This is made even more insidious when similar action against larger economies has had to be withdrawn. Such behavior undermines global rulemaking and the multilateral system, which we as small states depend on to ensure we have a voice. It is in the context of such a system that we welcome the election of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to the United Nations Security Council. The candidate of the Caribbean community is the smallest ever country to be elected to that prestigious body. The work put out by Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves and the representatives of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as well as their CARICOM counterparts, was bolstered by the regard in which our community is held in international fora. This resulted in the overwhelming acclamation of 185 of the 193 voting countries. I congratulate you, Prime Minister. These countries appreciate the principled positions that our member states adhere to and the respect we have shown for the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter. We have upheld non-interference and non-intervention in the internal affairs of states, prohibition of the threat and use of force, respect for sovereignty, adherence to the rule of law, respect for the constitutional framework and democracy, and the right of people to self-determination. Those principles are non-negotiable for us as small states. The upcoming series of high-level meetings during the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York in September gives us a platform to pursue our interests. As a community of small island and low-lying coastal developing states, SIDS, CARICOM recognizes the importance of these high-level dialogues, with their emphasis on issues related to climate change, sustainable development, and financing for development. It must be recognized in these discussions that SIDS have peculiar characteristics which differentiate them not only from developed countries, but also from other developing countries. The International Monetary Fund has concluded that our member states exhibit extreme versions of long-term low growth, high debt, significant vulnerabilities, and limited resilience to shocks, which set them apart from other middle-income states. However, CARICOM member states have been graduated from full access to multilateral concessional financing. If we are to build resilience, which we must, and which is a very costly proposition, we need access to concessional financing prior to the onset of a natural disaster. Studies by the IMF and the World Bank also indicate that every dollar spent in building resilience saves 4 in reconstruction costs after a disaster. These facts are of particular importance within the context of the upcoming UN high-level meetings. Mr. Chairman, as a government distinguished guests, the values, principles, and commitment we share have guided us over the past 46 years. Our integration journey is recognized as the standard bearer by other developing countries, seeking to build their own regional integration arrangements. From across the globe, they have come to study our systems, our institutions, and our region and our integration movement as a model for improving theirs. They understand that what we have been doing has endured. Our progress, slow in some areas, has brought benefit in many others to the people of our community. We have earned the respect of the international community. We have shown that a small group of states, acting in concert with purpose, can achieve much. That must be the guiding light as we deliberate on the next 4 days. I thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General. Please join me in welcoming Dr. the Honorable Timothy Harris, outgoing Chairman of CARICOM, who will deliver his remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairlady. Sir Emmanuel Neville Sinak, distinguished Governor General of St. Lucia, and Lady Sinak, the Honorable Alan Chasney, Prime Minister of St. Lucia, and Chairman of the Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government of the Caribbean Community, I wish in the interest of time to crave your indulgence to adopt the protocol so ably established before me. I want at the outset to express my sincere appreciation to the Prime Minister of St. Lucia and the Chair of the Caribbean Community, the Honorable Alan Chasney, his government and people, for the generous hospitality and the excellent arrangements put in place for our meeting. Could we give them a hand of applause? I speak on behalf of my colleague heads of government when I say that I am confident that given the conducive and salubrious environment provided, we will have a most productive and fruitful meeting. I am delighted that the baton of chairmanship is being passed over to Prime Minister Chasney. We are graced with several special guests, and I refer in particular to the Prime Minister of Norway, Your Excellency Erna Solberg, and the Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres. Secretary General, you continue to be a reliable friend of our region, and that was demonstrated in part by your visit to the affected states after the hurricanes of 2017 and your continued advocacy with respect to the effects of climate change, which is an existential threat to our community. Prime Minister Solberg, your presence is historic. I am advised that you are the first head of government of the Nordic countries to interact with our CARICOM counterparts in this way. I must commend you and your advocacy on climate change and your initiative which resulted in the establishment of the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, which you chair, and of which Prime Minister, the Honorable Andre Holness of Jamaica, is a member. The blue economy and ocean resources are indeed critical to the sustainable development of our region. I certainly look forward to the exchanges with our two distinguished guests. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I assume the chairmanship of the community at a time when internally we were, and we still are, vigorously pursuing measures to advance the CARICOM single market and economy. We were also seeking ways to strengthen our security arrangements. Externally, we were and are still grappling with the situation in Venezuela, which is having a direct effect on some of our member states. Within the past 6 months, we have been making some headway in driving the CSME forward. An agreement on public procurement has been finalized and was open for signature in February at the intersessional meeting of the conference in St. Kitts and Nevis. The agreement would enable the creation of competitive and non-discriminatory conditions within our single market for access to bidding for public contracts above a certain threshold. When this agreement enters into force, it will open up a significant market for our private sector expansion within member states. However, there are still outstanding issues which we must address if we are to keep pace with the implementation plan to which we have given our blessing. If our people are to feel the impact of a fully operational CSME, we must make every effort to adhere to the timetable. I want and underscore to commend the efforts of the lead head with responsibility for the CSME, the Honorable Mayor Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, who has been striving unceasingly to ensure progress in this area. Could we commend her efforts? Similarly, in the area of security, which is of concern to all of us, we must act urgently to fulfill the obligations to which we have signed on. Also in February in St. Kitts and Nevis, the agreement on the return or sharing of recovered assets was open for signature. The agreement seeks to enhance the effectiveness of regional security cooperation by establishing a framework for the return or sharing of recovered assets from criminal activity. The special meeting, hosted by the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. the Honorable Keith Rowley, lead head for security, allowed us to identify concrete steps to combat the scourge of criminal activity. We do not have the luxury of time to introduce the agreed measures as the burden of crime is weighing too heavily on our citizens and residents. The regional approach to each other is critical to providing a safe and secure Caribbean community. I turn to a word on the matter of Venezuela. Our engagement in the attempts at resolving the situation in Venezuela has clearly demonstrated that there is a role for CARICOM to play. It is also now quite clear that our principled stance, enunciated from the outset, and our approach are now being accepted by other parties. Along with my colleague, heads of government, Prime Ministers Motley and Rowley, and the Secretary General, we have represented the community in engaging with the United Nations Secretary General and other interested parties, such as the International Contact Group. The CARICOM Secretary General and I have met with the International Contact Group on several occasions, while our foreign ministers have engaged with Venezuelan opposition representatives. We have consistently argued that the cardinal principles to undergird a resolution of the political crisis in Venezuela should include: 1, non-interference in the internal affairs of Venezuela; 2, the inviolability of the sovereign state; 3, respect for democracy, rule of law, and the Constitution of Venezuela; and 4thly, peace and resolution of conflict. The Montevideo mechanism provides a guide to achieve this peaceful resolution. Its core imperatives are dialogue, negotiation, commitment, and implementation. Speaking to dialogue between both parties, I must commend the efforts of the Norwegian government to bring the two sides together in an attempt to end the impasse and allow the country to return again to stability. Venezuela is our neighbor, and our member states are being affected by the crisis. For us, this is not a geopolitical game of chess. It is a situation creating real hardships for millions of people right on our doorstep, fostering instability in our already fragile economies and exacerbating criminal activity. We must make clear that in all this, CARICOM plays a role of honest broker. All stakes are high. The undermining of the Caribbean as a zone of peace, the disruption of tourism and trade, uncontrolled migration with risks to health, and socioeconomic problems in member states, compounded by illegal trade in arms, cannot be whisked away. It has been a rewarding experience working with colleague heads of Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago on the resolution of the political crisis in Venezuela. For CARICOM, non-interference and non-intervention in the internal affairs of states, prohibition of the threat and use of force, respect for sovereignty, adherence to the rule of law, respect for the constitutional framework and democracy, and the right of a people to self-determination should forever be core principles, and they should never be sacrificed. These are what we have to cling to in a world where international law and multilateralism are being undermined and small states are being increasingly marginalized. And despite whatever apparent differences appear from time to time in the ranks of CARICOM, I verily believe that we all subscribe to these fundamental principles. Multilateralism is the medium that ensures that we as small states have a voice in the global arena. It is what makes it possible for one of our member states, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, to be elected to the most powerful body in the United Nations system, the Security Council, and to promote and protect the interests of the small and vulnerable states. Let's give another round of applause to the government and people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It is certainly worth commendation that one of the smallest countries of the world, in one of the smallest regions, should at this time assume a position on the Security Council. Again, another round of applause for the government and people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But most importantly, their success represents the success of the Caribbean community. Give CARICOM another round of applause. I want to say a brief word on Haiti. The deteriorating situation in our member state of Haiti is one of great concern. The continuing violence causing loss of life and property clearly must cease, and dialogue must begin to arrive at a solution to this cycle of instability. The Haitian people deserve, as people everywhere deserve, to go about their daily lives in a calm and peaceful environment. I reiterate the community's call for all parties to act responsibly and in the interests of Haiti. We stand ready, of course, to offer the good offices of the community on a continuing basis to bring a resolution to this crisis. Students of history, of course, would recall the special place that Haiti stood in the development of our region. One of the first free countries in the Western Hemisphere, with all that proud legacy, with all that Louverture and Dessalines and Christophe meant to enslave people everywhere, and the impetus which Haiti gave to freedom everywhere in the Western world. Haiti must again live so that we can be so proud of that tradition when Haiti achieves its full potential. So we are hopeful for Haiti. The past 6 months have been very illuminating for me. They have made me even more aware of the efforts that must be infused to ensure that our integration movement keeps on track. It has been recognized that what we have may not be perfect, and there certainly are some big imperfections. But it has been argued that CARICOM is improving every day. Yes, there has been progress in every one of the 4 pillars: economic integration, foreign policy coordination, difficult at times, human and social development, and security cooperation. But this progress has been incremental, while our challenges have exponentially increased. And that is where the major challenge is going forward. Our inherent vulnerabilities as small island developing states, compounded by the growing existential threats, do not allow us the luxury of time. If we are to merely survive, we must accelerate our processes of common action. If we are to thrive, we must be transformational and not incremental. We must leapfrog and not just keep up. The technological revolution, the volatility of the geopolitical climate, the erosion of global principles, as well as the continual assault on every comparative niche advantage that we strive to carve out. All these necessitate a sense of urgency and continuous self-critical, unsentimental assessments to determine whether the pace of progress in the community is commensurate to the magnitude of our challenges. In the context of our regional project, prosperity requires growth, and growth requires equity and inclusiveness. We come together as a region because we recognize that the aggregation of our demographics give us a viable market mass, that the combination of our respective advantages makes us more competitive, and that the resolve of our unity is what will make us unassailably strong. The provisions of our revised treaty in Chapter 7 on disadvantaged countries, regions, and sectors, and the establishment of mechanisms like the Caribbean Development Fund are interventions designed to address imbalances of size and scale in our region, as well as promote equitable and inclusive growth across the CSME, which would guarantee a shared and universal prosperity for our people in the region. In my view, our revised treaty, esteemed colleagues and people of the region, is visionary and robust enough to have specified these provisions in Chapter 7. The question is whether our politics is pragmatic and visionary enough in its regional embrace to effectively utilize them. I repeat, the revised treaty is visionary and robust enough to have specified these provisions. The question to be asked is whether our politics is pragmatic and visionary enough in its regional embrace to effectively utilize these provisions. Finally, a word of appreciation to the CARICOM Secretariat, and more specifically, the Secretary General, Ambassador Irvin LaRock, for the sterling support given to me as chairman and to the region generally. Working closely, thank you, working closely with Ambassador LaRock and his team over the last 6 months, I can attest to their industry, that deserves a round of applause, ingenuity, reliability, and professionalism. We are blessed to have such an excellent cadre of regional public servants working to effect our integration arrangements. So I end with these words: forward on with the CARICOM integration. I thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister Harris. The next item on our program is an interlude in which we showcase the musical and oratorial talent of the young people of St. Lucia, beginning with a choir of the St. Mary's College, an educational institution that has been in existence in St. Lucia since 1890. The choir is directed by Mr. Eric Hutchinson.
out there, conquer your fears, and don't you wait too long. Only you can make me feel just like a king. Love you give to me so real, makes me give in. So what am I longing for? My baby to love me more. What am I longing for? CARICOM release the cure. So what am I longing for? My baby to love me more. What am I longing for? Oh, CARICOM release the cure. Not by might, not by power, by your spirit, God. Send your spirit, God. Not by might, not by power, by your spirit, God. Send your spirit, God. You are the fire, we are the temple. You are the voice, we are your song. You are God, we are your people. You are the light, we stand in awe. We stand in awe of you. We stand in awe of you. Not by might, not by power, by your spirit, God. Send your spirit, God. Not by might, not by power, by your spirit, God. Send your body and everybody give Rally, rally on the West Indies. No noble thoughts brought us here to this region, but through it all, we have risen above. Through our flannel nights, flashing their willow and leather, they keep us on the flame, but feel our undying love. This Caribbean nation is rising fast, a sunbeam cutting through our clouded past. Our passion fills the world like a raging fire. As the sun shines, you know we can take it higher. Everybody on raise, everybody give praise. Rally, rally on the West. Rally, rally on the West Indies, go on forever. Thank God that I am a West Indian and I come from the land of sun. Thank God that I come from the Caribbean, ready for the never done. Let me see you. Hands up for Dominica. Hands up for Jamaica. Hands up for Vincent Grenadine. Hands up for Lucia. Hands up for the party up in there. Hands Caribbean people everywhere. Hands up in the air. Hands if you are a West Indian. that beat. I got to move my feet, it hit me in every direction. There is a vibration when I listen to it. I love this music, it got me on the beat. It hit me like aye, 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 yeah. Now start rock, you can't stop. Turn to the rhythm and open the pop. You can't stop and jump to the front and back now. Boom, no, 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 the pop. You can't stop, yeah, just rock. Turn to the rhythm and open the pop. A face, yeah, face, when pass up, shake.
I just live my way, I just live my way, swim, swim. I just live my way, I just live my way, swim, swim. I just live my way, yeah, live my way, swim, swim. I just live my way, I just live my way, swim, swim.
It's so enticing. I'm watching the way she whining, and the waistline rolling, and a pretty good smile it lining. So I start approaching, cause the CARICOM not no shy thing. Move quick like lightning. So baby, baby, let me tell you something.
I just live my way, I just live my way, swim, swim. I just live my way, I just live my way, swim, swim. I just live my way, yeah, live my way, swim, swim. I just live my way, I just live my way, swim, swim. I just live my way.
Seth Isidore is an 11-year-old grade 6 student of the Eucharist Lewis 7th-day Adventist Primary School who loves sports, reading, and music.
Please, allow me to adopt the protocol that has already been established and say good afternoon to all of you leaders who have been especially called by God to lead His people in your respective territories. The story is recorded in the book of Acts chapter 8 and 9. There we find a character named Saul. Saul was on a mission to destroy all that was called good, noble, and righteous. One might have thought that there was no hope for this dreadful bigot until one day, in his march of destruction, he was stopped, reprimanded when a bright light struck him off his racing horse on the dusty Damascus road. He heard a voice asking, "Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me?" Saul asked, "Who are you, Lord?" The voice said, "I am Yeshua whom thou art trying to destroy, and it is hard to fight against your conscience." Let us pray. Great God, our Heavenly Father, I pray that you will touch the hearts of all those who hear my voice. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. In a most revolutionary manner, Saul's life was radically transformed. From a caterpillar, he became morphed into an amazing born-again butterfly. His life was lived in beautifying those of others. He was no longer Saul, but now called Paul. Once an antagonist of the gospel he so vigorously sought to destroy, would later declare to the Romans, "I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation." Scripture says that Paul, once an agent of destruction, became a sentinel of light, a channel of light, and a blessing to the whole world. In its time, he participated in taking the gospel to the entire world. Under his influence, Turkey was liberated, China was elevated, Asia and India was delivered, the Middle East was Christianized. And Paul's prevailing mantra was, "I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation. Today, I too stand in a gap like Paul, and I boldly declare that I am not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation. So I call you back to the old beaten paths of righteousness, where Solomon says in Proverbs chapter 14, verse 43, righteousness exalts a nation, but wrongdoing is a reproach to any people. The time has come for our nations to bring an end to lawlessness. Everything is governed by laws. Laws are for our own good. Countries need laws. Homes, clubs, cabinets, all survive because of laws. Even God has laws. Over the years, right doing and everything that is noble has fallen through the gates, and the very thing that was the agent of change became the tool used to keep us in darkness or ignorance. So now we are drinking from broken cisterns. It's a world where nothing is defined, nothing is truth, and nothing is believable. Subjectivism is in, and objectivity is the order of the day. In our region today, there is too much blood in the streets, increase of youth crime, embezzlement of time, resources, and human life. There is a deep lamentation over the gradual death of meaningful family. The prophet Isaiah well spoke of this present condition when he said, gross darkness shall cover the people. Leaders, let me say to you today, there is a need to change directions. It is time for our region's youth to rise up and be counted, or else they will be enslaved in the things of the world. There is too much illicit sex, too much drugs in the streets, too much incest, too much uncontrolled passion, too much fatherlessness, too much bullying. Revelation chapter 3 verse 20 says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. God is looking for stateswomen like Joseph, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Ruth, who will be courageous and true, bold and confident. Our regions are languishing for the want of men and women who will stand even though the heavens fall. Men who will not be bought or sold. There is a need to return to the basics of great parenting, common courtesy and mannerism, praying and seeking God, caring and loving each other, empathy for our fellow men. We need to reflect on those virtues that made us the people we once were, more purpose-driven, more Christ-centered, and God-fearing. Today, true godliness is at an all-time low. Church-going and praying is at an embarrassing point. Greed and selfishness is the order of the day. Leaders of CARICOM, I say, there is a need for a turnaround. It is time to return to the upper room in prayer. It is time to return to cultivating the reading of the Word of God. It is time to return to loving our fellow men. Sorry to say, we have not always walked in the paths of righteousness that was paved for us. We have slipped through the cracks, and now we are walking on sinking sand. But I am happy to know that we still have some praying mothers and fathers in the Caribbean. We still have some praying CARICOM leaders who seek the Lord's face daily. The Lord can help us to make the change that we are so in need of today. This God changed the situation at the Red Sea when he made a muddy riverbed into a super highway. This God changed the blazing fiery furnace into an air conditioning unit and saved 3 young youths. He was crucified on a cross. He was buried without hope of returning from the cross. But on the 3rd day, he rose again. He is the one who opens and no man can shut. He is the one who spoke and it was done. He is the lily of the valley. He is the Alpha and the Omega. CARICOM leaders. He has promised a better future for all generations and all children who obey him. He wants to change your situation in your life, in your country. He has proven to be God, and he can make a difference in your life if you will allow him. He will honor those who will honor him. He has promised if we participate now, we will share in his glory. So get ready to meet him. The psalmist says, thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. In closing, I say that I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation. If this is your plea, please raise your hands. Amen. Thank you.
The St. Lucia School of Music was founded in 1987. Today, the group performs under the direction of Mr. Richard Payne. They will be performing Vivaldi's Spring, followed by Tribute to Florita, a folk medley, arranged and composed by Mr. Gregory Piper. Thank you very much to the young people of St. Lucia. Ladies and Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency Antonio Gutierrez, Secretary General of the United Nations, graciously accepted our invitation to join CARICOM heads of government as their special guest for the meeting. I now invite Secretary General Gutierrez to deliver his remarks.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. It is a privilege to be with you in St. Lucia. And I thank the Caribbean community and the Prime Minister and Chairman of the Conference of Heads of Government, Alan Chastanet, and Secretary General Irwin LaRocque for the invitation to join you. It is no surprise that just the way from the airport to this room, with a short stop between the two pitons, was an enchanting experience. As Derek Walcott, one of St. Lucia's two Nobel laureates, once said, and I quote, "You cannot wake up in the Caribbean without a sense of astonishment," end of quote. But the beauty of St. Lucia and the uniqueness of the voice and way of life of each of the Caribbean islands is threatened by the particular challenges that small island development states face. Today, I would like to focus on some of these challenges, especially climate change and other obstacles to sustainable development, including the imperatives of citizen security and building resilience, and the importance of access to development finance. A little more than a month ago, I visited the South Pacific and saw Pacific Island nations are addressing the climate crisis and approaching all their development investments through a climate lens. And it is just 2 years since I visited the Caribbean in the aftermath of the devastation caused by Hurricanes Irma and Maria in 2017. Years of hard-won development gains were destroyed in Barbuda and Dominica in only a couple of days. And this was not the first time that the Caribbean has faced such devastation and loss, and the immense challenge of rebuilding while safeguarding development achievements. Hurricanes Ivan and Thomas, and the many others that came before Irma and Maria, are still etched in the memories of Caribbean people. As climate-related natural disasters grow in frequency and severity, the risks to families and to development overall will only intensify. And the Caribbean experience makes abundantly clear that we must urgently reduce global emissions and work collectively to ensure that global temperature rise does not go beyond 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. And that is why I'm asking all leaders from governments and the private sector to present plans at my Climate Action Summit, or at the latest by December 2020, to cut greenhouse emissions by 45% by 2030 and get to carbon neutrality by 2050. We must massively increase our ambition to advance low-emission and resilient development, including addressing loss and damage from climate impacts. And we need all hands on deck to make this transformation possible. CARICOM and the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center have taken the lead from the front lines. You are our important allies in the fight against climate disruption. We hear your voices loud and clear in the negotiation halls. You have been stalwart advocates for a 1.5 degrees threshold for over a decade, pushing leaders to devise new models of economic development and affordable, reliable energy access. Island nations in the Caribbean are fast becoming influential test beds for innovative climate action, such as investing in decentralized renewable energy. This will not only yield more economically sustainable sources of electricity, but it will provide clean energy solutions. Microgrids and decentralized solar energy systems will also ensure that power losses after storms will be shorter and led catastrophic to homes, hospitals, and businesses. Investing in sustainable development also means investing more in concrete conservation and resilience measures. Around 8 million tons of plastic end up in the oceans annually. And in the Caribbean, you see the impact of these pollutions. We need to fight climate change, but we need to fight also against the degradation of oceans that unfortunately we have not yet been able to stop. We all have to act on a daily basis to counter these grave threats to marine ecosystems and the tourism sector that are so central to your economies. From plastic pollution to coastline erosion, more frequent extreme weather events, sea level rise, and biodiversity loss, Caribbean states face immense pressure due to the actions that are committed essentially by others. And I highly commend the leadership of CARICOM heads in presenting a bold vision to make the Caribbean the world's first climate resilient zone. The creation of a Caribbean Resilience to Recovery Facility is an important development that should be fully supported. When fully functional, this facility will provide a regional indigenous mechanism for sourcing talent, experience, and financial solutions to support CARICOM members to build resilient communities and nations. And I also must highlight that women are at the heart of the resilience equation. This is true in the Caribbean as it is elsewhere. As we shore up the resilience of Caribbean societies, we must address the issue of citizen insecurity. Murder rates in parts of the Caribbean are still very significant. Violence against women and girls is also a dimension of citizen insecurity, which increases in the wake of natural disasters and is an obstacle to resilient societies generally. I'm therefore also pleased that the Spotlight Initiative will be partnering with CARICOM and 6 countries in the region to make substantial focused investments, some 50 million euros, in prevention and redress for violence against women and girls. It is important that gender considerations underpin all our efforts to promote citizen security and sustainable development. Excellencies, in addition to managing the recurrent and increasing costs of climate-related events, small island developing states face a range of economic constraints. The small size of their domestic markets and their limited capacity to participate in global markets, particularly damaging when it translates itself into the isolation of their financial systems from the global financial system, hinder them in generating economies of scale. Their heavy dependence on imports, particularly of energy and food, make them highly vulnerable to price fluctuations and other external shocks. And their very high levels of national debt constrain their ability to effectively address high and persistent levels of poverty and inequality. These challenges are further complicated by the difficulties SIDS face in mobilizing development finance on affordable and appropriate terms. These are challenges you know only too well, and we join your call and will take the steps we can to improve access to development financing as a priority. I agree with you that eligibility for official development assistance and other forms of concessional financing should include vulnerability criteria in addition to gross national income per capita. I have to say that I have assisted to many interesting technocratic discussions about vulnerability and what it means. But having visited several small island development states in the Pacific and the Caribbean, I never found one that was not a clear case of vulnerability that should be recognized by all. I also agree with you that the speed and predictability of climate financing, especially for least developed countries and SIDS, should be improved. And the prevalent use of debt instruments in climate finance needs review. For middle-income countries that are particularly vulnerable, the multilateral development banks and development finance institutions have a key role to play in providing more long-term, low-cost debt financing. But the time has also come for the international community to consider seriously how best to address the rising problems of over-indebtedness of middle-income countries. This slows their progress towards sustainable development and makes them even more vulnerable to external shocks. I strongly support the ECLEC proposal to convert debt to investment in resilience through the Debt for Climate Adaptation Swap and Resilience Building Initiative. And I know that several other initiatives are being prepared, and namely under the leadership of the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. And I would like to express the total support of the United Nations and my personal support to any initiative aiming at creating the conditions to allow for adequate financing, for building resiliency, and for recovering for the devastation of climate accidents. There is one thing for me absolutely clear. There is no way the countries of the Caribbean can recover from a devastating hurricane or build systematically resilience in relation to climate problems, doing that based on unsustainable growth of their debt. This is a common responsibility that the international community needs to recognize. And I'm determined to help to change that by bringing more resources and strengthening UN support to SIDS. But to achieve these and other global challenges, we must reaffirm our commitment to multilateralism and to the United Nations Charter. We must face the headwinds together, and there is no alternative to cooperation and collaboration. I've embarked on a far-reaching set of reforms to ensure that the UN development system is fit and ready to help countries to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals in the next decade. Let us seize this historic opportunity to ensure that every Caribbean country and all small island development states are able to receive optimal support from the UN to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Also in September, the United Nations will convene 5 summits, all of direct significance to the Caribbean. The high-level political forum review of the 2030 Agenda, the Finance Summit to take stock of where we are in implementing the Addis Ababa Action Plan or financing for sustainable development, the mid-term review of the Samoa Pathway for small island development states, the high-level meeting on universal health coverage, and the Climate Action Summit. These 5 events, seen in its globality, offer a strategic opportunity for your collective voices to be heard by the global community. And I encourage you to use these opportunities to amplify your story, present ambitious and concrete country plans to address the priority action areas that are the focus of these 5 summits, and press for more meaningful support for sustainable development in the Caribbean. In closing, let me thank you for the strong cooperation between CARICOM and the United Nations. I would particularly like to recognize your leadership on key United Nations priorities, not least climate change and financing for development, as I've mentioned. But I welcome the adoption of the CARICOM counterterrorism strategy, developed with the support of the UN Office of Counterterrorism, and reiterate UN systems' readiness to continue to cooperate with CARICOM on security challenges, even in relation to the issue of foreign terrorist fighters. I commend your commitment to foster regional cooperation on the fight against illegal drug trafficking activities. And I salute your efforts to provide an adequate response to refugee and migration crises affecting the wider region and dramatically aggravated as a result of the situation in Venezuela. Later this month, the UN system and CARICOM institutions will hold their 10th General Meeting in Georgetown. The meeting will provide an opportunity to review the cooperation between our organizations, explore areas where the reform effort I'm leading can deliver greater dividends, and where we can expand our fruitful cooperation. Let us work together ever more closely in fulfilling the hopes and aspirations of the people of the Caribbean. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General Gutierrez, for these remarks. Please welcome the Ava Dance Ministry, a Christian youth dance group, in St. Lucia, headed by Althea Emmanuel. For the past 12 years, AVID has been producing annual performances, and today will perform Caribbean gospel dance with drums.
What a day, 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 oh. When Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. Today, if you hear God's voice, do not harden your heart. Repent, for the coming of the Lord is near. Oh, what a day, what a day, oh. When Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. What a day, what a day, oh. When Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. Some a jump and a prance and a went up in a dance and a want give Jesus a chance. When Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. Said it's all about the eyes, so you feel like carry price and a why your father got advice. When Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. Some girls are run down man pass from man to one, but the money are the motivation. So when Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. Bad man from jungle of girls in a bungle, no heed God word, we say humble. When Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. Oh, what a day, what a day, oh. When Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. Oh, what a day, what a day, oh. When Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. Like when Noah build the ark and the whole of them attack and a pass them dirty remark. When Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. Like when the Red Sea part and children cross and the whole of your man them dead off. When Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. Remember, lying lips is an abomination. When Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. God a look on your heart and not your denomination. When Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. Oh, what a day, 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 yo. When Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. What a day, what a day, oh. When Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. Today is the day of salvation, no heart in your heart when the Lord said, oh. When Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. Enter through the narrow gate and not talk about wait, cause your life it could have soon done. When Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. Catch this. Don't make the devil trick you and hypnotize you. When Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. Him only come to kill, steal and destroy, no make him surprise you. When Jesus come, my summer, you can go home. What a day, what a day, what a day, what a day.
Thank you, Ava Dance Ministry. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Honorable Alan Chasney, Prime Minister of St. Lucia and incoming Chairman of the Caribbean Community, who will deliver his remarks.
Your Excellency, Sir Emmanuel Neville Snack and Lady Snack, immediate past Chairman of CARICOM, the Honorable Timothy Harris, colleague Prime Ministers of the region, Honorable Erna Solberg, Prime Minister of Norway, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, the Honorable Janine Girodi McIntyre, President of the Senate, the Honorable Andy Daniel, Speaker of the House, members of Cabinet, ministers from CARICOM states, the Honorable Philip J. Peer, Leader of the Opposition, Secretary General of CARICOM, Your Excellency Erwin LaRocque, members of the Diplomatic Corps, all delegates and special invited guests, to St. Lucians and Caribbean people watching us around the world, good evening. Before I begin my presentation, I want to certainly acknowledge the yeoman's work that the outgoing Chairman of CARICOM, the Honorable Timothy Harris, has achieved in the last 6 months. I don't want to count the number of miles that he has had to travel during his tenure, and I only wish for God's blessings that I only have to do at least only a quarter of what he has had to do. So again, Honorable Chairman, thank you so very much for what you've done for our region. I consider it a great honor to preside over this 40th meeting of the Conference of Heads of Caribbean Community. I want to welcome our specially invited guests to this conference and hope that this experience enables you to gain a deeper insight into what we as Caribbean people are facing, so that we may gain your understanding and, more importantly, your support. Let me also thank outgoing Chairman Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, the Honorable Timothy Harris, for his stewardship of the organization over the past 6 months. This occasion is of great significance to us in St. Lucia, as we are currently celebrating the 40th anniversary of our nation's independence, which was marked on the 22nd of February. On behalf of all St. Lucians, I therefore extend a warm welcome to all of you to this, our Helen of the West. For us as a country, this has been a year not just of reflection, but also a year of continuing to chart our path forward, which will enable us to finally take control of our own destiny and to appreciate our strengths. Among these strengths is being members of the Caribbean community. From the outset of independence, our forefathers understood, as I was recently reminded, that which binds us has always been what sometimes separates us. This is not to say that we must always agree, but to succeed, we must be all in. This happens to be the theme of our nation's 40th independence anniversary. Over the last few years, from climate change concerns to championing the rights of the Windrush generation, to fighting for tax justice and our fiscal sovereignty, we've had to let the world know we are here and we will be heard. These and other issues require us as CARICOM and as small island developing states to make some bold choices to secure our mere existence. I am truly honored to serve as the chairman of this 40th conference, which is taking place at a very critical time in the life of this region. A time when we can truly show the strength in our united front on key international issues. A time when we can once again, through our actions, inspire the people of our region and remind them of the necessity of CARICOM. A time when we can reflect on each other's individual successes and our collective achievements. Permit me, on behalf of you, my CARICOM brothers and sisters, to formally congratulate the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines on his country's recent election as a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. It is another example of what can be achieved once there is a firm resolve. All of CARICOM rejoices in this triumph, recognizing that this is a golden opportunity for St. Vincent and the Grenadines to take on board the calls for reforms at the UN body. When St. Lucia was elected President of the UN General Assembly in 2003, we received invaluable support from other CARICOM countries in maintaining that office. Understanding the importance of this new development, St. Lucia has pledged a contribution to St. Vincent and the Grenadines in maintaining and funding the office. I am sure my colleague Prime Minister will not mind me saying that although this seat was won by St. Vincent, it is also a CARICOM success, and we are behind you 100%. Hence, I call on all members to also pledge their support to St. Vincent in maintaining this office and ensuring a successful tenure. On the issue of blacklisting, to date, CARICOM countries on the list have been trying to comply with requirements of the EU Code of Conduct group. The fact is that the EU has been targeting us as individual countries, and we as CARICOM missed the initial opportunity to respond jointly. But it's not too late. The question now is, how do we, as developing countries, meet the requirements of a just tax regime while maintaining our fiscal sovereignty? We must, as a region, be committed to a high standard of governance, but this cannot cross the line and infringe on our competitiveness. As a region, we should rebel against the use of a blacklist that permanently damages our reputation. There is absolutely no justification for this methodology. The lingering uncertainty over Brexit is another matter that will continue to concern us in the coming months. We must begin to view this as an opportunity. On one hand, we will have to work as a unified bloc to strengthen our historic relationship with the UK. We must also now work equally hard to formulate a renewed relationship with Europe. During our deliberations here, we recognize that another hurricane season is upon us. The evidence has shown that climate change fuels increasingly destructive superstorms, as we've seen in the carnage left behind by Irma Maria 2 years ago. In fighting the effects of climate change, we would need to depend heavily on the international community for assistance and support. The last two have taught us, however, that countries that are the greatest emitters and the cause of our current plight are not sufficiently willing to compensate us for the damage that is being done. Despite our best efforts, we have deliberately not amended international economic protocols to even allow us to make the necessary investments in building our own resilience. We have to urgently look for more immediate and innovative ways to solve our problems. I look forward to presenting in more detail the plans for the creation of our own Resilience Foundation, and to seek the support and endorsement of CARICOM during our deliberations this week. We also need a new governance structure that will allow us to draw down on the funds more quickly. We can't take 5 years to implement these resilience projects. We remain grateful to the Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, for his efforts to assist us, the SIDS, in that regard. And we are indeed privileged and honored to have the United Nations General Secretary attend this meeting, and we were looking forward to his support and endorsement of our foundation. At the same time, at the same meeting, we will be seeking the endorsement of the Pacific SIDS, as well as the developed countries and international development institutions. Among the other issues expected to engage us this week is a consideration of new measures to enhance the Caribbean single market and economy, which allows for free movement of goods, skills, labor, and services across the region. I welcome the renewed energy of Prime Minister Mia Mottley, and with her leadership and most importantly, her sense of urgency, I believe that we are well on our way to reinvigorate the CSME. I especially want to reaffirm and fully endorse the decision to include private sector in a more meaningful way and the plan to create a regional chamber of commerce. On our part, we must continue to be honest negotiators and be prepared to make the timely decisions. Colleagues, the situation in Venezuela remains unresolved and continues to haunt us. The effect of the breakdown can now be seen plastered all over the media in our own countries. The position of the Caribbean community on Venezuela has not changed. We've agreed that the resolution must be by dialogue, and it must be a Venezuelan-made solution, and that there should be no military intervention, that the rule of law must apply, and that the humanitarian situation must be addressed. We also re-emphasize the notion that the Caribbean region must remain a zone of peace. However, we cannot run away from the impact that Venezuela is having, especially as it relates to the security and immigration in the countries within close proximity. Given the critical importance of finding a solution to this crisis and the invaluable work of the special committee appointed by CARICOM, headed by the outgoing chairman, Timothy Harris, I am grateful that they have agreed to continue to take the lead on this issue. I have pledged and continue to pledge my full and unwavering support as we seek to find a resolution. Unfortunately, one of the scourges that continue to cause us all concern is that of crime. A number of interventions are being undertaken in the various territories. At a meeting in Grenada, the CARICOM Ministerial Council for National Security and Law Enforcement agreed that there should be a greater collaboration and cooperation among the member states. The goal is to achieve a more significant results in the battle against the flow of illegal drugs and guns, transnational crime, and the heightened incidence of homicides. Most encouraging was the decision of the Council to meet at least twice a year in order to fulfill their responsibility within the framework. We can look forward to a more detailed presentation with the accompanying action plans for the region at this meeting. Colleagues, I believe we are on this stage when some serious introspection is required on our part. The world now, more than ever before, continues to see us as one region. Our individual size requires us to act as one. Yet, we only talk, holding on to our individual sovereignty. History has shown that when we join hands, we only get stronger. Our survival, our obligations to our citizens, our legacy, all require that we take the necessary action. To achieve this, we must set a timeline to complete the reform and strengthening of our own secretariat. It will not happen if we are depending on a chairperson who is only in the seat for 6 months to drive this. In my opinion, we need to seek professional assistance and appoint a select committee to oversee this critically important transition. A strong secretariat is absolutely necessary if we are to strengthen our regional approach. And equally, the budget of the Secretariat has to more closely reflect this mandate. My fellow leaders, the pioneers of this regional integration movement, our forefathers, were ahead of their time. They captured the imagination of our citizens. Once the process started, we had a number of brilliant minds motivated to move it forward. I believe that we have lost some of that momentum. We must regain the confidence of the Caribbean people that something meaningful and life-changing is going to come out of our meetings. The most important question we must ask ourselves as leaders: how do we recapture the imagination of our people? How do we truly make CARICOM the driving force for change? Have we done everything within our control to assure the prosperity of our region to the benefit of our citizens? Can we say we are satisfied with our current status? Do we believe that all our citizens, or even the majority, are satisfied? Are we achieving our full potential? We must reflect on these questions and CARICOM's very own relevance. More urgently, we are losing our competitiveness to other regions due to the high cost and inefficiency of our national governance, and because we are not maximizing the opportunities in areas such as the creative industries, sports, tourism, our natural resources, and the blue economy. The impact of major global shocks like the Gulf War, the financial crisis and recession, the commodity price shocks, and more recently, natural disasters, have left our region scarred, weakened, and vulnerable. The new rise in nationalism and the decline of many developed economies has created a vacuum of global leadership, and more importantly, empathy. Our brothers and sisters in Haiti know this all too well. These difficult times require us to follow in the footsteps of our forefathers and to also take bold, innovative, and courageous steps. We must take control of our own destiny and the focus on things that we can control. We must remember and recognize the genius in our region that resulted in the establishment of this same CARICOM, the University of West Indies, the Caribbean Development Bank, the creation of the OECS and the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. And I remind you that we created these institutions of integration well before the EU and other regions did the same. Are we surprised? How can we be? We produced world-class athletes, a decade of world dominance by our West Indies cricket team, philosophers and artists with global impact. We introduced the only new musical instrument of the last century. Some of our business persons have become international leaders and created world-class brands. Our impact in the field of literature and economics earned us 3 Nobel Prizes, more per capita than any other region in the world. I'm sure this fact will resonate with our distinguished guest, the Prime Minister of Norway, the home of the Nobel Peace Center. Despite our size, we've made our presence felt at the most important institutions in the world. This region has produced amazing ideas, amazing people, and amazing results. So as we stand on the shoulders of these great achievements, I ask again, can we say we are satisfied with our current status? Do we believe that all our citizens, or even the majority, are satisfied? Are we pushing ourselves hard enough? As elected leaders, we must be prepared to rise to these challenges. And like our forefathers, we must inspire our citizens by finding the solutions to counteract the threats we face. This would require us to be creative, courageous, unified at all levels. As brilliant as the institutions we establish as CARICOM, there are times, given the changes in the world, we must now reform these institutions to respond to the new normal so that they can continue to serve the best interests of our community and our citizens. Let us not put off for tomorrow what we must do today. How much longer must we ponder the need for a stronger regional security force? Do we really expect criminals to respect our individual sovereignty? We already took steps to have a regional court. Let's finish the job. How many more studies do we need to confirm the justification for regional health care? The lack of an effective regional transportation policy is crippling our economies. The impact of de-risking and the withdrawal of international banks have created the urgent need for greater integration of our central banks and continued harmonization of our financial regulations. These are some obvious areas that urgently need our leadership and unified approach. I look forward to our discussions and wish to once again encourage you to enjoy your stay in St. Lucia. On a more lighter note, this meeting is coinciding with our carnival season and our famous Gros Soleil Friday night party. Despite the weight and importance of these meetings, I also hope many of you will take time out to enjoy the world-renowned hospitality of St. Lucia. As one of the only countries in the world, in fact one of two, was named after a female, please take time to let her inspire you. I would like to express my sincere thanks to the dedicated team from the CARICOM Secretariat, our Department of External Affairs, and the government departments and our volunteers, who have worked very hard to ensure that this week is a success. I thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister Chasney. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the departure of Governor General, His Excellency, Sir Emmanuel Neville Snack, and Lady. Kindly sit as we witness the taking of the official photograph.
And we've had a very rousing, Primus, if you want to say that, ceremony. We've seen the best of St. Lucia's talent on stage, the young people taking front and center. And it's always very refreshing when we can have our youth show our leaders that we are looking very hopeful for new futures, new experiences. And we had the leaders, the outgoing chairman of the Caribbean community, who spoke very passionately some of the accomplishments that we've had in the last 6 months. And he spoke more specifically to the blue economy that is emerging right now in the Caribbean. The idea is that, listen, we've somewhat exhausted a lot of what the traditional means for the economy. So right now, we need to look at the resources that we have, what we have in abundance, and what do we have primary? Ocean, absolutely. So the idea of now being able to harness what we can get out of the blue economy, and we need to get ahead because there are other nations that are far into the game, and of course in the Caribbean, as we heard Prime Minister Alan Chastney say, we always seem to be playing a catch-up game. And we also heard that from Timothy Harris as well. And more interesting, he spoke about the sort of partnership that Norway has had with the Caribbean, and that has been in the last 3 years or so. For the first time, we've had Norway really engage in Caribbean leaders, and that is something that we must say thank you to Norway for, because it's a powerful voice when it comes to issues of climate change. Norway is amongst of the few countries in the world where they do not just talk the talk, but they're actually doing what's needed to ensure that we are fighting climate change. Heard the new phrase in there by Dr. Timothy Harris, and it's actually climate disruption. So, new phrase there in the climate change jargon.
Very encouraging indeed, Melissa, and of course the Secretary General of the United Nations also has, promises to assist the Caribbean community in many ways, particularly in climate change. And of course, climate change is a serious challenge for us in this region. And as you alluded to, Norway, the assistance. So this is actually guiding the community, the Caribbean community, to sort of embrace the other countries in being able to address the challenges of climate change. And so the fact that Norway and the UN are promising to assist and to guide us in that direction is a good sign for the Caribbean community.
But most importantly for us, meeting those challenges, really it's about financing. Where is the money at? And Norway is helping in that respect. We also know that Prime Minister Honorable Alan Chastney, during his stint as the chairman for the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, the OECS, spent a lot of time in being able to lobby the international community in not just looking at the Caribbean and when it comes to concessional lending, to look at us and simply give us lending based on our GDP, because it is something of a disadvantage to our small state. And so a lot of groundwork has gone into lobbying the international community to make a change to that. And there is a lot of progress being made at this time. A lot of discussion for the first time. They've come to the table, discussions have been had. And it's something that the Secretary General for the United Nations alluded to. And more talks will be had on that in September when the UN General Assembly convenes. We also have the issue of security, and on Venezuela, of course, and I said Venezuela is an issue that is not soon to go away. The Caribbean community is asking for there to be peace and resolution to the conflict, and that can only come about through dialogue, non-interference in the internal affairs, respecting the sovereignty of Venezuela. But of course, at the same time, the humanitarian crisis that is attached to that issue continues to be something of concern to all countries, especially those that are feeling the brunt of the influx of Venezuelans.
Of course, another important factor is the food import bill. Recently, St. Lucia's implemented the food and vegetation vegetables import substitution project. And of course, this is going to assist greatly. And I believe we are playing a leading role in that regard. And I think CARICOM will assist. And I think Ambassador Leroy alluded to that, to the fact that they are aware of that, and St. Lucia has taken the lead, and very soon we will be able to assist to at least take the lead, and of course be in a position to be able to address the whole question of food importation and avoiding this over $4 billion US.
Over $4 billion US. It is a staggering amount. And when we have to think about the implications of that amount of money annually, this is an annual figure, annually all of this money leaving the Caribbean region so that you can import food. And so the question of how we begin to chip away at this, whether it's a question of not just talking about food security and growing food, but there must be something sustaining in the plans. And as you indicated, St. Lucia has launched the project, and that deals with 7 crops specifically. So they're down to specifics, 7 crops that farmers and ordinary St. Lucians can get involved in. And once you can do that, then you do it for not just for doing it at the subsistence level, but of course at the commercial level as well.
And the agricultural, the Ministry of Agriculture is going to play a pivotal role in that regard with our agricultural extension officers and farmers.
Absolutely. Promise another very important issue, and we really can't overlook this, the blacklisting. This is a critical issue for the Caribbean region. Earlier this year in February, Prime Minister Alan Chasney led a delegation and did have dialogue with some leaders with respect to that. Now CARICOM is taking a very firm position. The language is strong coming out of CARICOM regarding the blacklisting, saying quite clearly that the Caribbean region is being targeted, and by this sort of targeting it seeks to destroy its offshore financial services, and it's a detrimental blow for us because the goalpost keeps shifting. And so it is something that at the OECS level, at the recent OECS assembly, we had leaders there saying emphatically that what needs to be done is a more forceful political approach. And perhaps the diplomacy is nice and it will work at some point, but now a more forceful approach needs to come, and CARICOM is in line and in sync with that.
And it's a pity that it is the EU who's leading the strategy of blacklisting. This is definitely going to be detrimental to us here. And can you imagine the European Union, spearheading this strategy? This can be, as was rightly said, a devastating experience for the Caribbean community.
So it has to be addressed quickly. And of course, we heard from our Prime Minister, Honorable Alan Chasney, as the incoming chairman for the CARICOM, and he was talking about change. What is needed right now in order for CARICOM to be able to achieve all that it is set out to achieve, and is saying that there must be definite change. The people must feel confidence in CARICOM, that all of these sessions are not just talk shops, but coming out of those talk shops that you must have actual work and an active plan. But also he's saying that for that to happen, what we need is a stronger CARICOM secretariat. And so moving forward, we expect to see the Caribbean leaders acting upon this. And at the end of the 6 months, then we'll have another evaluation from us as to exactly whether they were able to accomplish all that they set out to accomplish. Right now, their Primus, we're seeing that everyone is moving into the festive mood. The official ceremony has come to an end, And the real work begins. The sessions, working sessions, begins tomorrow, Thursday and Friday. Well, from the Royalton Hotel.
And we're just saying that our Prime Minister is actually meeting some of the members of the press.
Mingling, the leaders are mingling. Yes. But for us here from the Government Information Service, we want to say thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us. Thank you so much for tuning in and being interested in all of the events that affect your life. The decisions that are going to be made by the leaders are going to shape your future. So
we continue to bring live coverage of
the events. Yes. Tomorrow there will be live coverage. There is a special luncheon that's happening, and some of the other sessions. You can tune in to the National Television Network on all of its platforms for those events. I am Lisa Joseph saying goodbye along with Primus Hutchinson. Thank you so much for tuning in.